Hello and welcome. Urban Habitat District Master Plan Scale category, where we will take a closer look at our remaining Award of Excellence winners. I'm James Perrick, Manager of Urban Design with the City of Toronto Planning Division, and it was my great honor to be the chair of the jury of the Urban Habitat Awards this year. This award recognizes projects that have made extraordinary contributions to the urban habitat, transforming full city blocks into vibrant mixed-use areas that are exemplars in a number of different ways, which you will experience in the following presentations. Our first presentation is on Darling Square, located in Sydney and presented by Seamus McCartney, Head of Creative Strategy, Product and Place Development for Lendlease, and Sacha Coles, Director, Design and Strategy, Aspect Studios. A sensitive insertion into a dense urban fabric in Sydney, creating a new people place and civic presence. Now to Seamus and Sacha.
Hello, I'm Seamus McCartney. I work for Lendlease Australia. I'm a head of product and place for our development business.
And I'm Sacha Coles. I'm the Director of Aspect Studios. I'm based in Sydney, and we were the lead designer for the public realm and landscape at Darling Square.
Today, Sacha and I will be presenting you Darling Square, which was an amazing, significant urban regeneration project for Sydney. Located on the western edge, right down in the old industrial area of the city, this project was incredibly important in binding the university, downtown, and startup tech areas on the site of what was an old entertainment centre, which was impermeable and not open to the people of Sydney to be able to use every day and every night. Firstly, though, I'd like to make an acknowledgement of country. Aspect Studios and Lendlease acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we work on and travel through, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And interestingly, for this project, we're actually working on the area that once was a cove. So this is reclaimed land, which brought in some interesting conversations with the traditional owners about how we might approach this. Just citing Darling Square, at the top of the slide, you can see Barangaroo, and just above there is the Opera House and Sydney Harbour Bridge. Darling Square is the end of what's known as the western side rejuvenation of the city of Sydney, located in Darling Harbour, and was part of an overall redevelopment of the conference facilities for Sydney, a hotel, and down the bottom, a lively new neighbourhood named Darling Square. Just next to Chinatown to the right, Piermont to the left, and the university sector to the south. Zooming into Darling Square itself, as part of the winning bid for this precinct, we decided that what we really wanted to give back was a strong boulevard that you can see running straight through the centre of the slide, which anchored a large square surrounded by residential and commercial uses. And then off to the side, we cloaked a rail corridor, which is now trams, with some student housing to bring some much needed life to this part of the city, which was dormant before this development. It was really important to us that we bound this into the existing street network of the precinct, but we also didn't cannibalise any of the other uses that surround this project. So Chinatown being one of the oldest areas in Sydney and much loved by many Sydney-siders and international visitors. So we wanted to make sure we added to that, we didn't detract from that. So to do this, we decided to create something a little bit different. After winning the bid, we decided that it was really important that we created a Darling Square vision, but not only a vision which articulated our ambitions for the neighbourhood, but an articulation of what we were going to do and what success would look like in creating this extraordinary urban habitat. So in acknowledgement of the special place of this development and its mixed use outcomes, we decided to create the Darling Square Placebook, which was our articulation of our vision to create this amazing urban habitat, but also to articulate what we saw success being. And that just wasn't bold statements, it was actual articulation of the success factors that we thought were going to bring street life into this development and support the uses not only within the development, but bring in our neighbours that sat outside. To do this, we really needed to ensure that we enthused and inspired the consultants that we'd chosen to work with. And in fact, we went on to an international competition to ensure that we got the best that could do that. But we wanted to make sure they were very clear of the ambitions of the client to ensure that we did really create the best place. Of real importance to ensuring this vision was brought together by our designers was being really clear on how we expected it to be used. So you can see on this slide, it talks about the ways that it needs to be incorporated into the design process and the articulation that we're expecting back from our designers. But it was also created to help inform as part of the international competition for the Darling Exchange and the landscape solutions to give some direction around what our ambitions were. In articulating this vision, we were very clear on who we thought the psychographic profiles of the people that had used this space before, such as the urban dancers, which you might find on one of those slides, right through to the new residents and people we expected to come and belong to this area who may not have chosen to do it before. And we did this by mapping out what the tempo of the day might look like and how they might use this space. And you can see on the left-hand side, all these disparate users actually form together along the bottom there and combine to create an intensity which pulses through the days. This ambition this ambition set a really ambitious target for our designers to respond to, being multifunctional and multidisciplinary. And to do this, we were really clear on what our place pillars were. We recognised that this development was needed to have a big city psyche, one that was ambitious as a large part of Sydney and a tall, dense development with all the open space that we required. It needed to reinvent the area. It needed to have street life and culture, but also be a living showcase for the best of urban living. And to do that, on the left-hand side, you can see we articulated what outcomes we would require to make that happen. So these weren't just motherhood statements. They were things we measured our designers, our partners and consultants on how they were responding to our requirements. And just to be really clear, we then articulated a place project master plan, which articulated the areas and their importance and the things that might need to be done to ensure this was a cohesive project. Obviously, this was just a start. Our designers then came and helped us envisage something better than we had. And you'll see Sasha from Aspect articulate the influence that they had in then shaping this plan beyond. This was a slice in time and we were looking for a collaboration to build the best habitat that we could. And a great articulation of this was our central building. Originally going to be handed back to a government partner, we decided to partner with the City of Sydney to deliver a new library, childcare, market at the bottom and a rooftop venue at the top in an extraordinary building designed by Kengo Kuma. But that process of defining what we required pushed us to do more than we would normally do. And the outcome speaks for itself. But to get there, we needed to create some exciting briefs. So on the left-hand side, you can see the Darling Exchange, the building I just talked about. And on the right-hand side, a very aspirational but very clear brief for the street, for Pier Street and the square. These two documents weren't your normal briefs. These are documents that were ambitious. They set the tone for what we wanted to achieve, but left the scope for our design team to come back to us and push us further. And that collaborative exchange has been what's really made Darling Square the amazing place it is. Sasha, I'll hand over to you to show us the outcome, the great outcome from all the collaboration that we went through.
Thank you, Seamus. And I'd just like to reiterate that the invitation to participate in an international competition was in itself a great offer for this project. And we went into it with full positivity, knowing that the process was competitive, but its intent was to draw out the greatest place outcomes possible. You saw the brief that Seamus has talked to, and not only was that a good guide for us as designers as we moved forward to create this place that you see, but it also was a valuable tool in the partnership between designer and client to remind ourselves that this was our ambition the entire way through what was a 5-year process. You may recall the plan that Seamus put up previously, and it had a very different configuration in terms of the #1 building at the centre of this. One of the things which I'll talk to in a moment was the 3 key moves that we undertook in the design competition. And those moves responded to the urban conditions of this site, the boulevard, which connects all the way through, the fine grain lanes, which have a very different response from a design perspective, much more human scale, to the central part, which was about crafting and defining a square with a community building that was different from everything else around it. The public realm continued through it, and this circular building seen in the round, its idea was to celebrate community and offer something different from the workplace, the retail and the residential which sits around it. These diagrams on the screen here articulate the three big moves from our design competition. The first being the carving of a ground plane which establishes a datum and creates a democratic space, which is the new square at the centre of the development. The second, which works with that, is framing the edge. There was a level change between the square and the boulevard, which ran further to its side. And our strategy was to define that edge through either retail, lightweight retail, or a canopy, or a seating area that people could occupy. So to be within the square, but outside of it at the same time. And then finally, the most important piece to a degree is the community building, the exchange. And this is the building in the round. And simply by its dynamic shape, its simple geometry, it stands out from the buildings which are around it. And of course, that was the brief that went on to Kengo Kuma to design the building that is there today. These have been included as competition sketches just to articulate the way we started to think about translating our brief. Darling Square sits at the edge of Chinatown. It has a very diverse and multicultural demographic, not just culturally, but also in terms of age. It has students, it has elderly, it has a wide draw, being simply in one of the largest event spaces of Sydney in Darling Harbour, but also one of the most dynamic day and night spaces in Sydney, being right next to Chinatown and the student precinct that Seamus mentioned previously. So these were some of our slides that looked at the kind of expression and the theatre of everyday life, whether that's with family. This is a residential neighbourhood in a highly urban area. So the provision of places for people to use as a backyard or as an everyday space were in balance with the needs for drawing people into a retail environment, the best F&B that Sydney has to offer, and the odd event that might take place. One of the key diagrams for our competition pitch was to say that this place can't be everything to everyone, and indeed it doesn't need to. In terms of creating the best urban environment, the best urban habitat for this development, we did that with full recognition that just to the north of us, there is an event place which is for the masses, which is for the thousands. If you're going to see an international event in an outdoor environment, you go to the north area, to the convention centre or Tumbalong Park. Here, we needed to create a space where city gatherings can take place, but perhaps it's in the area of the hundreds, the tens, or even creating the place for someone to be by themselves, surrounded by other people in the city. This is a really important diagram for us, that we scaled every design move according to those numbers there, where you can be by yourself or whether you can be with a group of 10 people or 100 people, but no bigger. This is a complete aerial of Darling Square, and again, just being used to highlight the master plan as it has come through into fruition. The pinwheel configuration has created a really dynamic set of spaces. On the bottom, the south, the right, where we connect Little Hay Street to Little Hay Street, it brings people in to the square without actually revealing the square from day one. So there's a process of compression and expansion and delight when one opens up into the square and sees the community building. Further to the west, another lane, Steam Mill Lane as it's called, is another compressed space which has a range of fine grain tenancies, which is much more creative and fun and has a light artwork throughout it, which is an attractor for that night economy. As this is a roof view, you can see the green roofs, which we participated in designing as well for the Commonwealth Bank, which sits here as a new workplace. Seamus mentioned previously the student housing, the water-sensitive urban design in the streetscape to the west.
Sasha, I think there's an important point here, and one of the great things about this development was that we led with our landscape design competition before the built form of the round building that you see there. And it opened up an opportunity to expand beyond our boundaries. So if you could imagine that round building was sharp-edged and rectangular, the square itself would have been tiny and just to the south of that building. What the team did here was make it a building in the round, which extended that square well beyond the actual boundaries of the precinct, but allowed all the other precincts to come together. It was a very important device.
What I'd like to now do is take you through a gallery exhibition of the three component parts, starting with the square, the largest move and the community building. On the left, what's evident is the greenery, the idea of bringing a lot of nature into an urban environment to really seek the benefits of biophilia by creating a place which in these high density environments you don't often have, which is a kind of a front yard or a backyard, an area of turf where families can free form use in any which way they prefer. You can see in the bottom left, the movable furniture, I'll talk to more of that, and the extension, the canopy, which unfurls from the spectacular timber-clad building back out into the public realm to frame that edge. Remember, the second move in the design competition was to create that veranda, that edge, which is occupiable and shaded. What we ended up doing was to create a linear park using native trees and a range of different seating types, which were very generous in nature to allow people to occupy this in whatever way, shape or form they saw fit. This image here I like because of the casual nature of it. The moves are bold, the moves are generous. The seating types go from movable seats to fixed elements such as this, which you can lie down, you can fall asleep under the shade of trees, you can be with a family or you can be by yourself. These images here, again, quite detailed in nature, but speak to the different opportunities to occupy space within Darling Square. The image on the left shows the spill out from the F&B retail in the Exchange building at the edge of the square. And the image on the right, which is perhaps even more descriptive, shows the range of different seating types, from standard park benches through to the bespoke furniture, which was made by collaborating designers in the process, the Blue Wren Furniture Suite, and then through further to people lounging on the lawn, and then further again to those people spilling out from the Exchange. So you get this sort of foreshortened view of about 4 or 5 different ways to sit and occupy the square. One of the considerations of a project of this scale is, of course, clear articulation and wayfinding. One of the things Darling Square does well is draw the surrounding streets through. So it appreciates the existing grain of those streets and it works with them. This view here from the southeast corner of the square illustrates that crossing of streets, pedestrian streets as you move through and you are opened up to the view of the Exchange. The trees in this instance have been designed to be a deciduous grove so that in winter, which this is a winter shot, it takes advantage of that northern light coming down and creates a really welcoming, warm space for Sydney-siders to occupy. I'm going to now talk about the edge to the square, and some of the moves that we've done here have been really innovative in terms of the way we have articulated the level change between the square and the boulevard, and in doing so, treated that as an opportunity to create more place for people to occupy. This space here, which we talk about as a linear park, is the edge to the square, but is also a multitude of opportunities for people to use for seating and for hanging out within Darling Square. The 800 mil, or close to a metre in level change, has provided the opportunity for almost an amphitheatre type environment where people can sit and do the age-old pursuit of people watching. This whole environment has been set up for the comfort of people to use in a range of different ways. You can see the small red tables here, which have Indigenous language and images, interpretive images of some of the native fauna, which we have used within the garden setting. So all of these plants down here are either native or endemic to the Sydney environment. Again, more of these detailed shots, and you can see that we do focus on people. If you remember Seamus's introduction, success of this project was really about understanding those users, the demographics, the psychometrics of the people who were going to use it. What were they looking for? Well, they were looking for safe, comfortable places where they could spend time and work or hang out, meet friends, where you don't have to buy anything or be within a private space just to use this new square in the city. So these images here talk to that kind of casual nature, which we are blessed to be able to work with in Sydney because of our climate, that this is an all-year experience. Whether they're just moving through, whether they're spending time within the linear park or the landscape or just taking a moment out, what you have here is the opportunity to be within nature, within the city. One of the keys to the success of this project was the collaboration and the generosity of that collaboration between architects and ourselves. We were very privileged to work with Kengo Kuma and Associates and Lend-Lease Design in the development of the community building, the Darling Exchange, but also this piece, the veranda, which is really a landscape element at the edge of the square. Its function is to create some dappled shade, but also to be a framework for plants to colonize over time. So this early photo shows the canopy pre-plants taking over. You can start to see on some of the columns, the plants making their way up, and the tension steel at the top, which will be a new roof and a new canopy covered by greenery. We're going to take a scale change and move into some of the more delightful places, which are the laneways. The laneways, when we looked back at our brief that was given through the placebook, are those areas where 10 things can happen in the space of 10 footfalls. A real attention to detail, as you can see in the paving, and the articulation of grades where we had to mound up because of overland flow. We took that as a positive and an opportunity to create seating. The laneways are extremely dynamic in Darling Square and operate day and night. They also provide an offer for food and beverage and lifestyle retail, which is accessible and at the lower end of the expense for students or for anyone who can get a quick bite and hang out within this area. You don't need to pay $20 for a meal. You can come down here and get a sandwich for $8 and sit within the laneway. Look at the art. The art has been commissioned specifically for this project. Our role as designers was to assist Lend-Lease in that commissioning process, and we sought out artists that would be complementary for these spaces. Peter Kruger, in this instance, is a jeweler, and this is her first commission, which comes alive at night and really highlights the joy of finding this place in the city. Little Hay Street is the other lane which connects back into Chinatown. Again, with it comes this incredibly expressive light artwork. Also, the signage for the laneways is different in scale and has been designed for the scale of a laneway. Everything has an intimacy. Retail shop fronts have been designed to be very small format and to spill out within the lane. So it is a bump space. So it feels buzzy. It feels like somewhere that you kind of want to be because it's very dynamic. And there is a range of things from tattooists to food and beverage to other lifestyle uses within these laneways. It's a bit more experimental than the retail, which is around the square, and purposefully so. The details, when you're dealing with a project of this scale, it's really important not to forget the one-to-one, the feeling and the sound and the sensory environment that one gets when walking through a space like this. We spent a lot of time and effort on the fine-grained detailing, the human experience within this square. So going from master planning down to, one-to-one detail between paving was a great privilege for us in this project. These images here that are following illustrate a set of some of those details from the tables, which people might choose to sit at. These are fixed tables on the left, which is an interpretation again of some of the beautiful native botany that we've used in the area, the Banksia in this instance, and also interpreted through Indigenous language. The middle image here shows a mahjong table, and it's not only a nod and a reference to the fact that we are within Chinatown, but again, this was an offer to the community that pre-existed this project to come down, and an invitation to use these tables for recreation. And then the fine grain detailing, the beautiful crafted, sustainable timber that we've used in the seating details, which is robust, which is enduring, and which just has a level of thought to it, which you don't often see in projects of this scale and that have been completed in this time frame. One of the most lovely parts that we were able to develop in this, thanks to our client and the trust they had in us, was to take on this interpretation of Darling Square. And you can see here the allusion to the cockles that were on this site. This, as Seamus mentioned, was a cove and a water site that was tidal. And this was a place where for millennia, Indigenous people had come to eat, hence the name Cockle Bay. And we have referenced some of those significant epochs of history within this interpretive element. We love the idea that it becomes a play element as well for kids who live around the area and use this as their front yard. And to riff off the language of the tall buildings and urban habitat, we believe that successful landscape is very much about creating urban habitats for people that are joyous, delightful, and memorable. And planting in the right spot and the right textures being maintained dutifully over time is a great way to create those urban habitats which take full advantage of biophilia and greening our cities. This image here, particularly the one in the middle, is success for me and for our office, which is just wonderful engagement of, a young kid exploring one of the finer grain parts of the project. So finally, from myself, I would like to thank you for the opportunity. It is wonderful to be shortlisted. This is a success for us as an urban project. As you can see, we have delighted ourselves and hopefully the target audiences, which is the public of Sydney, with this project.
Sasha, thank you. Very eloquent as always. For me, we're measured at Lendlease by being developers of scale. We create value through the places we create, and we look to make communities thrive. But, I really love that we haven't spoken about commerciality as we've spoken through this project, because this was a very successful project. 1,200 apartments call this place home. We have 20,000 square metres of commercial space where workers come every day. There's 1,000 students that live in the student housing, and Sydney comes to use this space. But for me, it's as much about the scale of the development and the details of the development that show we've left a legacy beyond the project itself that will be a quality place for Sydney-siders to enjoy for the next decades and hopefully 100 years.
Thank you, Seamus and Sasha. Next up, we have Hudson Yards, East Yards, located in New York City, transforming a rail yard into a new urban community, integrating public space, spectacular public art, incorporating the High Line, and in transforming New York's Hudson River skyline. We'll now hear from Marianne Kwok, Principal, Combe Pedersen Fox Associates, and Andrew Rosen, COO, Related Companies.
Hi, my name is Andrew Rosen. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Hudson Yards, and I'd like to thank the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat for considering our Eastern Rail Yard project in the Master District Plan category this year. This is a photograph of our project, which I'm very proud to say is not actually a rendering, although it looks quite a bit like what we envisioned about 15, 14 years ago when we first started out looking at this project. So we'll walk you through our site plan here, which has a number of buildings. The Eastern Rail Yard, which is between 10th Avenue and 11th Avenue, between 30th Street and 34th Street on the west side of Manhattan. The second phase will be the Western Rail Yard, which is between 11th Avenue and 12th Avenues, again from 30th Street to 33rd Street there. It's a massive project. It's had quite a number of buildings and a lot of thought through how to combine everything into a community that really would be vibrant, that could be built in as orderly a way as possible, and really create the scale to create a new neighborhood over here on the west side of Manhattan. And so one of the things that we did there was to make sure that we had different architects on each of the buildings. We have KPF for a number of our sites. We also have Skidmore, Merrill, Diller, Scafidi, and Renfro, and Foster and Partners on our first series of buildings. And we expect to engage other architects for the next phases of the building to really make this part of the rest of the city. So I think that was an important component of our master planning strategy. We also wanted to make sure that we linked it with the components around it. So the 7 train was extended to this location from Times Square. You see the 7 on the plan here. We also have the High Line coming in from the south and connecting in and around our site. And so connecting to that High Line and all of the people, visitors and locals who come to that was a very important aspect of our planning. We have 5 buildings here on the Eastern Yard proper between 30th and 33rd Street, plus a couple other sites that we acquired through the process at 50 and 55 Hudson Yards office buildings. The eastern portion, what we call the super block, has 10 Hudson Yards, 30 Hudson Yards, and in between them, the shops and restaurants, which is really the anchor for the vibrancy of a lot of the space here, in addition to the public square and gardens outside. On the southwest portion of the Eastern Rail Yard, we have the Shed, which is a public arts space, as well as 15 Hudson Yards, which is a residential building, 35 Hudson Yards, which is a mixed-use development site. We built there the first Equinox Hotel, as well as an Equinox Club and some residential above that. And then we'll go through, all the details of how this came to be from what was a rail yard into something that is a neighborhood people enjoy every day. But it was always designed with development above in mind, and the rezoning in 2005 really set that in motion. And so what we have here is a rail yard for the Long Island Railroad. It's basically a parking lot for the trains for the Long Island Railroad. And that had to remain active throughout our construction process. So we had quite a long construction process. We had to make sure the trains were running all the way through. And in addition to those train yards, there are several tunnels that run beneath. So one is the Amtrak tunnels that run west under the Hudson River and connect the Northeast Corridor. That's a vital rail link for the Eastern Seaboard here. The other components include a tunnel that connects north to Albany, and another tunnel that we actually began building, which is the right-of-way for the future connection of the Gateway Tunnel into Penn Station. So we've built the first 2 phases of this. The third phase runs under the Western Rail Yards piece, which is yet to be built. So there were a lot of challenges and complications in constructing the physical development here. We have a number of constraints, obviously, with the rail tracks below, and we hired some of the best engineers in the world to figure this out. It's a combination of trusses over what we call the throat, which is the 4 tracks that run directly into Penn Station, as well as caissons and other deep structural elements that connect on the terra firma around that space. So we tried to orient the buildings and the heft of the scale here on the north and south to be around the tracks as opposed to on top of them. And then our retail, which is in between the 2 large buildings on the Eastern Rail Yards, 10 and 30 Hudson Yards. But when it's all said and done, the way the people enjoy this space is through the public space. And the open public space in the center was a critical component of the master plan as planned by the city, I think very thoughtfully in terms of creating quite a bit of open space here. What that meant was that the buildings got quite a bit taller than they would have otherwise been for the same density. But the result is a public space that really is a new piazza for the western side of Manhattan, and something that draws people in. In order to get that public space to look like it does right now and to deal with all the horticulture there, we had to deal with, how do we actually put plantings here that are going to survive. And in fact, we had to put air conditioning in the tree pits to actually make them work. With the exhaust and heat coming out of the trains below, we had to make sure that the trees were going to make it through. So we added that infrastructure, which was a piece we did not contemplate when we started here, but I think it's made for quite a meaningful and lush set of gardens. And we hired KPF to design the structure of our first buildings here, 10, 30, and 20 Hudson Yards. And this diagram, I think, really illustrates the complexity of interweaving all these different aspects into one coherent project and one space that people can enjoy. A lot of jobs created here, a lot of people who put their sweat and tears into making this project a reality, and something really to be proud of. So we had to work with quite a number of tenants here as well, and attract the best and brightest from a number of different industries to make this all work. We started with our original anchor tenant, Coach, now Tapestry, who was actually in the neighborhood to begin with. They were on 34th Street and saw the opportunity out their window every day, took advantage and partnered with us to create a great building over at 10 Hudson Yards that really fit their operational and functional needs in a way that was different than what they had before. There's an atrium that connects all their space, and it really became a new hub for inspiration of their design work. This new model for buildings with floor-to-ceiling glass offered a lot of advantages in terms of layouts and what tenants were looking for in terms of how to lay out their space and make their workers as productive as possible. And we'll see what the evolution of this is as people come back to the office and move forward in the next few years. I think it'll be really interesting. Taking a look at some of the interior spaces and the way the tenants have used the office space here, I think it's interesting to note the differences. Each tenant has approached their space in a different way, and the flexibility of column-free space with floor-to-ceiling glass really offers a lot of options for tenants. We have a residential offering here as well. All these buildings work together to really create a differentiated product and a neighborhood that has made a big difference over here on the west side. Because we had such a large platform here and a large opportunity, rather than an individual building, we look to use that scale to our advantage to think forward about the development and about what real estate and neighborhoods will be like over the course of the future. So we created a technology platform that allows for a number of different services, including frictionless entry and connectivity, wayfinding systems, and also just the backbone for applications to be invented and added to a system which has a lot of bandwidth to make that innovation possible going forward. So that's been an attractive component really from the beginning of this project. The other piece in terms of sustainability is our cogeneration plant. We have a 13.2 megawatt cogeneration plant sitting above our retail center here. That plant takes advantage of the fact that we have different uses, including residential and office, that need power at different times and need heat at different times of the day. And as a result, this plant is highly efficient. It can save on the waste energy that would have been consumed had we drawn from the grid directly. We have a whole network of pipes and wires that connect all these buildings, create some backup power and redundancy that's been attractive to tenants. And we have a whole control room to monitor our energy use in a way that we can optimize for both the consumption in the buildings and for the environmental impact that it has. The first building, 10 Hudson Yards, earned a LEED Platinum certification, which was a milestone, the first one under that LEED 2009 set of criteria. And then the whole neighborhood has been awarded a LEED ND Gold certification, which is the first neighborhood in Manhattan to receive such a designation. One of the biggest pieces for newcomers to this space, if you come and visit us at Hudson Yards, what you see is our operations team and the staff and the customer service here is at a different level really than anywhere else. So if you come here, you have a different experience because of the people you meet and and the experience you have through our staff and the culture that's been set here, which I think really makes an enormous difference. In addition to the built environment, in addition to all the great things that we can offer, having people here and the training to engage people in a positive way really makes a big difference. And then the arts with the shed has quite a big impact as well. This space is very flexible, so it can host concerts, it can host art exhibitions. The building actually moves, so this component, which slides out, moves back and forth to create a public open space below it. The windows can open up, and so you can have indoor and outdoor events, a lot of flexibility. This is, again, a picture, not a rendering, which I'm very proud to say. And I want to turn it over to Marianne Kwok, Director at KPF, who's going to take you through quite a bit more about the project. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Andy. We are honored to be included in the Multi-Building Urban Habitat Award. There are 3 things that I would like to share about this project. They are Hudson Yards in the context of New York, the relationship of the public space to the city, and how the architecture of the master plan mitigates scale and engages with its immediate context. Hudson Yards is located in the far west side of Manhattan. It is along the Hudson River. Before the project, this neighborhood in the city did not have a name. We looked at the site historically. Since Manhattan's development, the area was always industrial, used in the transporting of raw materials and manufactured goods, and very much linked to the transportation infrastructure of the city. The site was a void in the urban fabric that cut off connections of other neighborhoods to each other. It is a large area, the size of 6 city blocks. It cuts off access from the north to the south, and also from the city to the water. Surrounding the site are many transportation options: the ferry to New Jersey, Amtrak and the Long Island Railroad into Penn Station, and the extension of the number 7 subway line. The new stop is directly north of the project. Also surrounding Hudson Yards are 3 city parks, each very different in character. There's Hudson River Park, a long linear park that stretches the length of Manhattan, the High Line, a raised park on abandoned elevated tracks, and Hudson Boulevard Park, built over the number 7 extension. The public space at Hudson Yards connects these parks and forms a network of green space for the far west side. The Eastern Rail Yards is the 3 blocks towards the city next to 10th Avenue. As Andy has said, Related wanted to build a New York neighborhood that is made up of different buildings by different architects. It is a mixed-use neighborhood. The towers anchor the corners of the site, but each plays a special role beyond its program. 35 Hudson Yards at the northwest corner acknowledges the space of Hudson Boulevard coming into the site from the north and the space turning towards the river to the west. 15 Hudson Yards anchors the shed, a movable building that creates flexible space for cultural events and art shows. The High Line passes through 10 Hudson Yards. 30 Hudson Yards is the tallest tower with the most prominent skyline presence. Between them is 20 Hudson Yards, the retail block that allows permeability from the open space to 10th Avenue on the east. Between the 4 towers and the retail are the public square and gardens designed by Nelson Birdwolds. The open space has an elliptical paving pattern that radiates towards all the buildings and into the retail. The planting is all local species. And in the middle of that is The Vessel by Thomas Heatherwick, elevating public space, a view of the 4 towers from the river. As challenging as it was to build on a platform over the tracks, we were able to use the platform for infrastructure and building systems that link the buildings together and make it possible for us to achieve a LEED Gold neighborhood, the first in New York. 50% of the site is public open space. The space connects the parks network and also into the retail. The space connects the public gardens to 10th Avenue at the corners. New York is a vertical city, and the public space at Hudson Yards is on multi-levels. With the tracks, associated train buildings, and the platform, it was very important to maximize connections to the surrounding streets and parks. The site is sloping. 30th Street is substantially lower than 33rd Street. The platform is located at a level that has connectivity to 33rd Street and meets the level of the High Line to the south. At 30th Street, it becomes very unique because it is activated both at the higher level of the High Line and the plaza, and also at street level. Not public, but adding to the vertical levels of the towers are terraces for the hotel, the rooftop of the shed, and office terrace space at both 10 and 30 Hudson Yards. And at the highest occupiable level is a public observation deck. These are images looking at some of the various levels. 30th Street with the street level and the High Line above, the plaza level, the retail terrace overlooking the various levels of the vessel, and the observation deck at the top. Other images looking at some of the same levels, the High Line entering Hudson Yards, the lobby of 30 Hudson Yards has a subway entry from the number 7 line. Another view of the retail terrace, an office terrace, sort of halfway up the building, and then another view of the observation deck at the top. The architecture of the master plan is responsive and engages the surrounding context. The north and south trajectory of the High Line is acknowledged by the atrium of 10 Hudson Yards. The interior space opens up, forming a vertical courtyard. The southwest corner of Hudson Yards is chamfered. This plane reflects the light differently from the rest of the tower, and the height is at the same level as surrounding context. The diagonal of the chamfer also makes for a better space for the High Line spur, a space over 10th Avenue. This is a small plaza at 10th and 30th Street. The tower is setting back to make space for entries to the building, as well as a stairway to the High Line. The challenge along 10th Avenue was creating porosity and entries. Because of the tracks and the associated train buildings, the space was very limited to bring people into the building and up to the plaza level. Another view of 30th Street at both the street and High Line level. The shed is at the extended position and fronts an entry space from the High Line to the Hudson Yards Public Gardens and Square. This is the gardens, the plaza. The retail facade is designed by Jamie Carpenter. It forms a special backdrop for all the activity of the plaza and the vessel. The northwest corner is the main entry of 30 Hudson Yards and is at a diagonal facing the new number 7 station. At the northwest corner of 33rd and 10th, there's also an entry to the tower and the retail. It is acknowledged by a prow, leading the eye upwards. At the top of 30 Hudson Yards is the observation deck. It is slightly above the one at the Empire State Building, the first observation deck in an office tower. The one at 30 Hudson Yards is a 60-foot cantilever that gives Hudson Yards urban drama and very much a skyline presence. At the top, views of the city through the glass floor and out from this very far west vantage point are unique. At Hudson Yards, the urban habitat is brought up to the very highest occupiable part of the tower, and tall buildings are engaged at multiple levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion and Andrew. Our next presentation is on Lincoln Common, located in Chicago. A sensitive infill that inserts new density, includes affordable housing into an urban fabric of existing heritage buildings. Dan McCaffrey, CEO of McCaffrey Interests, and Brian Lee, Consulting Design Partner, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, will now present.
I'm Dan McCaffrey.
My name is Brian Lee, Consulting Design Partner at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill.
We're going to make a presentation of the Lincoln Common project we're both very proud of and hopeful of being the star performance of the CTBUH Urban Habitat Award. We didn't do it alone. We had a great team, an exceptional team, in fact. It was a happy gang to start out with, and I think the product reflects that. This slide is, I think, pretty illustrative of part of what we had to combat in one sense and we're blessed with in the other. But you can see the scale of so much around us is relatively small, and yet the project that we replaced was actually very big. It was the Children's Hospital. It was a sprawling complex, and in fact, their main building was only, I think, 22 or 20 feet shorter than our major towers. So,
Dan, we saw this as a great opportunity to build in really a very established now, an important neighborhood, but to add much needed density to the city, to make it a thriving space. And it was really interesting to us that even Blair Kamen came out and said that the project of over 1 million square feet was a very promising case study of how anybody could build big in this fine, great city neighborhood.
yeah, it's very, very true. We weren't greeted warmly originally by the community when first revealed. People were saying, "My goodness gracious, it's going to be dense." But the fact remains, what we were replacing was a project that covered nearly 6 acres of Lincoln Park. It was, as you can see, it was a big site, and it was abandoned. And yet Lincoln Park was crying out for a hub, for an identifiable project. And here was our opportunity to be able to replace what you see on the left, now empty, abandoned, very, very lonely, and replace it with something that brought activity to the city. And it was a 6-acre challenge, and we're very fortunate. We stumbled upon a plan that was then executed by SOM, but the plan included senior housing. The plan included elegant condominiums, rental apartments, 850 car parking garage was there and retained. And then the rest of the buildings that make up the site were redeveloped as historic buildings.
Of all the traffic on Lincoln Avenue was actually generated by the hospital. And you had parking of over 1,300 cars per day moving back and forth. And in fact, our project, with all of its density, actually decreased the amount of traffic in the surrounding areas and really made it a better place to live.
And of course, the economics, $122 million, new city taxes. Everyone can read the slide for themselves. In Chicago, you were at the time permitted to buy out of the affordable housing obligation. So you could give but a sizable sum of money to the city to pay for the 10% of affordable housing, which in theory would be built elsewhere. One of the first things we did, we met with the alderman, and I made a commitment to her to try to do the 10% affordable housing in the project without any distinction of quality or anything else. Those 54 apartments were going to be every bit as high quality.
Well, Dan, we're super proud to be part of the team and be able to certainly transform the site, garner neighborhood support. I think they really liked the fact that we respected their view corridors and sunlight access. And as you can see, not only with the green roofs, we provided that over acre of open space and tamed the surrounding traffic.
I think it was a real plus to be able to reutilize that garage and dress it up from the street level, which you'll it made building these new apartment units so much easier and so much more readily accepted by the community.
Yeah. We did try hard to make those towers very slender in proportion and orientation. And I think that, it was frankly the development team that also said, hey, let's try to keep as many of the existing buildings on the site as possible so that you could focus not necessarily on the towers, but more on the human scale with beautiful open spaces between and the ways that you encounter surprise and delight as you move around the site. So, Dan, as you know, the project encompassed the full triangular block bounded by Lincoln, Orchard, and Fullerton Avenues, and included, as you said, that huge parking garage, as well as the smaller buildings to the top of Lincoln Avenue on the top, as well as a site for senior housing in the lower portion of this image. It's seniors, condos, apartments in the blue, about 100,000 square feet of retail. That includes retail against the garage of that 800 car garage, and the office building, and then some additional retail on the corners. I think you remember that we talked about how can you connect all these different pieces. And we developed a master plan for the site that keyed on organizing those buildings around a strong network of connected open spaces that catered to a wide range of uses all year round. And then this allowed the project to have a clear entry from Lincoln Avenue that serviced both the garage as well as the triangle, and allowed there to be a drop-off condition, limited, but allowed there to be vehicular access that brought it into the site. There's about 100,000 square feet of retail, as I said, that fronts onto Lincoln Avenue in a series of either new storefronts, renovated storefronts, and then that lamination of retail that, Dan, you asked us to do to dress up and really avoid looking at that ugly base of the garage, and that created enough critical mass and energy to, we think, activate Lincoln Avenue and really, frankly, revitalize the neighborhood, because it was pretty dead there before.
I'd like to mention too, Brian, just at the bottom of the screen, the senior housing. There was an old building there, former nurses' residence from, I think the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was torn down and completely rebuilt in the same context, I would say, like architectural context.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now senior housing, which also was a big plus in the community. Big plus.
I think that aspect of trying to retain as much of the pieces of the historic streetscape, and then integrate them with new buildings that are set back and deferential to the pedestrian scale of the street. I think that was what was successful. The retail is broken down to neighborhood scale. It's super walkable, with the new storefronts, the street trees, the sidewalk, and really kind of lively signage. And I think that, you had a very great hand in helping the architects individualize the storefronts, so it wasn't all the same. Didn't look like a mall, but really appeared to be really like what Chicago is all about, that had this unique identity and is very authentic.
When you say mixed use, this really is mixed use. You have seniors, you have rental housing, you have condominiums, we have office space and parking, and and all of them today, I'm proud to say, are very successful.
There's the office building that was built on the right, but it really tried to think about the character of the district and create these loft-like office spaces that really in high demand.
Right.
On the left is that retail, that's a one-story retail. It's a nice kind of retail space. It's almost like a startup retail for many of the local tenants. On the corners, we renovated the white terracotta buildings that anchor the blocks and form just a great gateway up and down Lincoln Avenue, preserving the original part of the history of this neighborhood. So one of the things about the master plan that we knew the neighborhood wanted, and I think we discovered was a great strategy, was to make sure the plan of the triangle was as porous to pedestrian access and views as possible. And each of these open spaces that are connected reach out to Lincoln Avenue, Kemper Street, and Burling Street to really say, hey, welcome to this mixed-use urban center, and we wanted to make sure you feel like it's a place that would be the new district hub.
Yes. I think we all recall our alderman saying, I want this to be the crossroads of Lincoln Park.
Right, right. And those spaces are really beautiful spaces. It hasn't quite grown up yet, but and these photographs are a little bit old. But you know, the Chicago seasons, and that some of these spaces would really be overgrown and lush and be places of quiet reflection. And that sculpture there paid homage to the Children's Memorial Hospital legacy.
There was a little park across the street that the hospital wanted to sell. I walked that little park one day and saw this sculpture, and I think we'd owned the land 4 years or more before I saw it. And I called up the president of the hospital and I said, well, how about if we bring that sculpture back to the site of the hospital? And he was thrilled, and we gave a nice donation to the Children's Hospital and replicated, or replaced it on this property. It's beautiful. Children.
And I think it's a nice example of public art that isn't just something you buy and stick in the place and doesn't have anything to do with the site, but this is something that really is specific to kind of the history of the place, as well as this other piece that you asked us to save, which is the Martha Wilson entry. And so we took down that little pediment entry and preserved it with a green wall in the back and a future basic inscription, it's future panel for inscriptions to memorialize the project.
Yeah, that was the entrance to the former nurses' residence, I believe.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we think that there's several other spaces that cater to young families with children in playgrounds and very active areas. And all residences are able to enjoy these open spaces because they're adjacent to those residential uses. And then the front doors of the residential projects, both apartments, the condos, and even the senior housing, have views of those open spaces and then have just clear entry from the streets or from the plaza. And so these spaces become outdoor rooms, really kind of a series of great spaces for urban living. And I think that one of the things about the project that's consistent with Chicago's motto of Urbs and Orta, or the city in the garden, really shows how the project really respects that idea of nature. The Central Plaza is thought of as being really a hub of the project, in a sense, the living room. It's crowned by a great trellis, public art piece that creates a really a memorable sense of place. And importantly for us, it transitioned between the scale of the low-rise retail to the towers. Yeah, and we knew that it had to be used, especially during the cold winter months, for vehicular drop-off. But I was a little surprised, but more often the plaza is a dedicated people space, and it's programmed by your residential management team and the tenants' input for a whole series of seasonal events, such as you see from the program on the left, winter celebrations. There's summer movie nights. There's large outdoor parties. There's a whole host of special events that are planned for the space. And then even weekly events that happen on the weekends or during the week of yoga, exercise, storytelling. They even told me that they had Second City do a comedy hour out in the plaza. music festivals and children play.
And the plaza has become, using the mayor's words again, the crossroads of Lincoln Park.
Right. And it forms the heart of the project. And you can see from the adjacent staggered towers that are kind of broad in the face, but very slender at the ends. 17 stories, 19 stories, they bring a much needed residential density in both market rate and, as you said, affordable housing to Lincoln Park. So we're really happy we're able to get that density, but then in a way that really nobody notices how tall those buildings are. And I really, that unique combination of old, the terracotta and brick with the new, and the metal panels and glass of the towers, it really creates a very, think we like to say, tightly knit urban fabric that appears seamless. It doesn't look like, somebody came and blew everything out and did something completely new. But it looks like it really evolved over time into a rich variety of, I think, scales and materials and uses.
Well, what it does is, it wouldn't surprise me if a couple of years from now people say, well, what project?
Right.
There is no project. There's, as you can see just on this slide alone, when you take the little building with the turret windows on the right-hand side, and then you go over to what used to be there, the mechanical center, call it the plumbing and mechanical, all the engineering center, that's all cleared out now, retail, restaurants.
Yeah, we talked about a lot, right? What would be the appropriate thing? And we thought that we could be inspired by the artistic terracotta profiles of the corner buildings in that lovely white clay. Maybe we could actually try to recall that in the towers, and have it be consistent, but also be contemporary. And I love the fact that it feels like it transitions right into the interiors with these, I guess you say, refreshingly bright and airy interiors that creates this new urban offering in Lincoln Park. You don't know where that affordable housing is, right, Dan?
No, it's blind, and every affordable home is done to the exact same level of degree of finish as every other one.
Certainly you have this, incredible pool deck on the top of the building.
And the amount of space that we've been able to make available to people in this pandemic time because of the great program of the space.
It happens both at the top of the building, and you see the social room at the top,
right
at the top, and then it happens at the base of the building where you have the library and meeting rooms and business. So, we're nearing the end of the presentation, but I think that the project for me is really a model of a sensitive and, as you said, elegant density. Preserves the past, enhances the fabric and connections in neighborhood, and really creates a new mixed-use environment, a series of open spaces that I think has become a new neighborhood hub.
So the picture on the left, that's not even the early one. That's one of the later meetings, but you can see the intensity. I mean, when people say they have public meetings, sometimes it's 10, 12, 14 people, literally hundreds every meeting showed up. And people, have an opinion, and they were guarding their own properties. And by coming out and insisting on input, and 5 years later, cutting up the ribbon with the alderman in the middle. When we opened the project and wasn't yet fully occupied, we ran a few evenings, like you see on the left here, where we invited the people to come and tour the project. Everybody, to a person. Now, it might be that the positive people showed up, but to a person, I heard only compliments about the architecture, about the interiors, about the spacing, about the openness of the project.
Thanks, Dan.
And thank you, Brian. Thank you. Thank Antunovich. Thank O'Neill. Thank the whole works. It was all great. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian and Dan. Now we have Poly Greenland Plaza located in Shanghai, presented by Chungsheng Li, Architecture Manager, Poly Property Group, and Magdalene Weiss, Associate Partner, Architekten von Gurken, Marg und Partner, a project that creates new public realm and transitions differing neighborhood scales. Now to Chungsheng and Magdalene.
Hello, everybody. We are very glad to have the chance to present today our project Poly Greenland Plaza in Shanghai. My name is Magdalene Weiß. I'm leading the design team of GMP Architects in Shanghai. Next to me sitting is Mr. Li Chunsheng. He is a representative of our client, Poly Group. Yangpu district is a very young, upcoming district, which is beside the first developed districts in center of Shanghai, Puxi and Pudong, now a very hot spot for urban renewal. The chances here are universities with the resource of young people, young talents, and the situation along the river, Huangpu River, where a lot of old industry areas are transformed into a continuous river space. So big chances in this district.
As the leading investor of high quality cultural real estate in China, Poly Real Estate Group specializes in cultural real estate. Core of our business is to intensively cultivate the three business sectors of real estate development, real estate investment, and property management. Poly Real Estate has focused on the development and construction of high-quality projects for more than 20 years and has built and operated many urban public landmarks such as Beijing New Poly Building, Jiading Poly Grand Theater, and Shanghai Securities Buildings. On such a precious site in central area of Shanghai, we strive to create iconic and comprehensive building facilities. Our expectations towards the project were to be open to the city and the public, become a new habitat for urban life, and create an overall iconic city image. To meet the high expectations on this project, not only from our side, but also from the city to become a high-quality landmark, we decided to cooperate with GMP Architects. Well known for their public building design, GMP was commissioned with the design of the project and oversaw and coordinated the various specialist planners.
Poly Greenland Plaza is a very typical task in our portfolio in Shanghai. In Shanghai, we have to develop often very big projects developed in big sites by one developer. So here we tend always to do a very consistent group of buildings and have a mixture, variety of low and high-rise buildings and give it a very strong own character. Our method with these tasks is always that we study very carefully the city context, try to extend the texture, the urban texture we find into our site and give by this a local character to the whole building group. Another important thing always is for us that the spaces between these buildings have a nice human scale size that they provide for the neighborhood and the users themselves a high quality of urban space. If we look into the satellite photos of Yangpu district, the last 10, 20 years, we can see exactly the strong development from a more industry land, heavy dense, low rise and also low quality residential structures into a more and more modern city part. It develops very clearly along major axis, which connects the district with the water and parallel to the water, also major axis. Our project, Greenland Poly Plaza, is settled on an important corner of this development and along two important axes. Our major idea was to give a strong image of a new whole building group within a very heterogeneous context, which we can see here, very different structures. So we tend with our project to give a concentrated conclusion to the context and give an important new project by this. If we see the nowadays satellite photos, we can still see the heterogeneous surrounding. There is on the north part still an old compound for living residential. and there is a new headquarter next to it. There is an old historic building together with a beautiful park. We have refurbishment works on old industry lands to the northeast. And last but not least, to south, we have the very typical high-rise residential buildings. So overall, a very heterogeneous city context. Our strategy for implementing this huge new building mass is that we first of all place the buildings very carefully. The buildings itself, they are a bit round shapes, a bit soft shapes, placed like floating islands along a L shape and a side and two separate sides. So the placement of these islands is very clearly settled in two rows. One row towards the heavy traffic street to north and west, and another row towards south and east is giving a frame to the residential quarters. Very basically, to outside, the buildings have a very clear borderline, giving a character towards the street and a clear frame. Towards inside, we develop a very soft landscape, which is kind of producing plazas, always changing views and angles, a very vivid atmosphere. We open plazas to the important entrances from the streets. They are also shaped comfortably that they lead into the quarter. And between all buildings, we have open corridors, so the whole access to this inner street, to this comfortable street, is accessible along all boundaries of the project. Talking about the vertical design, actually there are a very clear strategy that we have low-rise buildings towards north for commercial purposes, and we have as a second skyline in the south the high-rise buildings towards the neighboring residential. If we look at this aerial photo, we can clearly see this strategy. We transform the historical scale, the low-rise building in north, into our side, and as a second row, we place the high-rise buildings, which are adjacent and leading over to the height of the residential high-rise groups. By this, we transfer the heterogeneity of the surrounding into our side and solve it there. So two skylines and the transfer from low to high in our side. If we see this aerial photo, we can also see the strategy of the staggering of the high-rise. We place the two highest buildings towards the park where they have a good distance view effect. And at the same time, we get a kind of staggering upwards towards the city center. And we can see very good in this aerial photo how this height development is leading to the top heights of Shanghai in Pudong. So if we look from the other side, we can see the relation to the river in the background. Also here, the staggering of the high-rises are melting into the southern high-rise area, and we have the low-rise, which is building a clear boundary for the traffic and for the adjacent historic buildings to north. If we look into the building design itself, in the first place, the overall shape look very organic and free, but in fact, these are very strictly modular and highly efficient buildings. We have the high-rise buildings up to 100 meters with an efficient central core. We have the low-rise buildings with flexible cores and mid-size buildings. All those have efficient floor plates, always the long side of this pentagonal shape towards outside, building the clear border, to inside. We produce short facades, folded facades, which has as an effect a very diverse and very interesting inner floating space. Also, this aerial study can show this kind of diversity of the meandering inner spaces, which also is good for the climate comfort. We have breaking wind directions with the ever-changing angles, and also very comfortable shaded spaces, good for the climate in Shanghai. Looking into the section, we can feel that the situation for people is always related to the low-rise situation. We have on 3 levels interesting circulation systems, the B1, also ground floor and the first floor are multiple connected with a lot of interesting walks and views. If we look into the facade design, also here we follow a very clear logic and strategy. We have strictly vertical facades for the high-rise buildings, which are horizontally segmented to transfer between the buildings on the different high points. The facade itself has a very good energy-saving performance. We have more than 50% opaque facade parts. And also this is very optimum for the reflection ratio, so we minimize the impact to the neighbors. Here the 200-meter high-rise buildings looking towards the park as a dominant gate feature. If we look inside, this is a very efficient office space. We have a big number of possibilities of separation walls, and we integrate into the facade natural ventilation. The low-rise buildings, they have horizontal facade systems which are very flexible. We can easily place shops, restaurants, all different type of uses, also administration. So we can single buildings also, can be used for single topics, or we can separate them easily. So also here for the horizontal facade, we directly integrate the lighting effect. So horizontal, vertical, also during night, evening effect are emphasizing the basic facade design and giving the very strong identity and character to the whole project. So daytime, we have this big line effect as a landmark. It also turns into the nighttime sculptural appearance, and the project is getting a very important and interesting position within the ocean of light, which is Shanghai at night. And we can see the dynamic of the staggered volumes. Even from top, we can clearly feel the interesting shape, the very characteristic dynamic meandering inner space, which is the most and highest quality of this project. Looking into the master plan, we can see that there are integrated into the system big green spaces. We have central green islands also at all entrances coming from the street. We lead into the inner comfortable space with green. And also this, of course, again, gives a good microclimate in this inner calm street.
In terms of specific product positioning, Poly Real Estate especially emphasized the public uses. For the 20% of the commercial functions required, we decided not to go for a larger volume shopping mall. Instead, commercial functions were distributed in smaller volumes and thus integrated into the surroundings with small-scale buildings. And at the same time, the combination of multiple independent volumes created more varied public space. We had suggested a layout for a pedestrian system on multiple levels to attract the public. connecting from basement areas to the second floor. A diversified and three-dimensional urban space was created. Any increase of investment due to these special features is considered as valuable and worthwhile.
Looking in detail into the spaces which are provided in this second road, in this private road, we can feel that these green islands are really giving the calm and nice atmosphere here. We can see that the design of the lobbies of all entrance spaces is carefully combined with the public space. So we extend the open spaces into the buildings. And these lobbies, they continue this soft line language, warm material. By this, we get a kind of transfer from inside to outside, a fluent connection and extending of the spaces. So that makes the big contribution to the neighborhood, to the public, that we open up this whole area. It is accessible from all sides, and by this, providing a good atmosphere for people working here, and in weekends and leisure times, a good resource for the neighborhood. The whole project, all these different ideas, get a dominant and important new structure in this area. The whole district gets kind of pulled together into an important element which contributes to neighborhood. And it is by this big improvement and interesting dominant new address in Yangpu. We will now show a short film, kind of giving a comprehensive idea of the whole project.
The entire project has maintained a very good consistency from concept design and construction design to final operation management. Although the project now houses different corporate tenants, the high-quality public spaces and common use areas still are under unified operation and management by Poly Real Estate. Since its completion, the project has become a benchmark for office projects in Yangpu District, an iconic place in Yangpu District, and an excellent model for urban renewal. Poly Real Estate has once again contributed to the urban habitat through its focus on high-quality development.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chung-Shun and Magdalene. Next up, we have our final presentation, Pudong Financial Plaza, Office Tower 1, located in Shanghai, a new block development that makes important connections and frames a new civic space. We'll now hear from Peter Tao, General Manager, Planning and Architecture Management Department, Shanghai, Lu Jiaoche, Financial and Trade Development, and Li Chao, Design Partner, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the presentation of the Lu Jiaoche Pudong Financial Plaza, located in Shanghai, China. My name is Leo Chow, Design Partner with SOM, and I'm here today on behalf of our entire design team, who are responsible for the architectural, structural, and interior design for this important project. And joining me today to share in the presentation is Peter Tao. Peter is our client and longtime collaborator, and he is the General Manager for LJZ's Development Group's Department of Planning and Design. LJZ and SOM have been collaborating for many years now on a number of significant projects along the length of Pudong's most visible and prominent boulevard, Century Avenue. The site for Pudong Financial Plaza is located at a critical juncture between the CBD, several residential neighborhoods, and an evolving commercial district to the south. The site, shown here in red, fronts directly onto Century Avenue along its northern edge. And what makes the site special is not immediately visible from above. The parcel is located at the convergence of two major subway lines that link Pudong and Puxi. Line 2 runs beneath Century Avenue, while Line 9 passes by the southern edge of the site. And additionally, the western edge was dedicated as an alignment for a potential future subway line. So together, these constitute an important nexus in the public transit system of Pudong and the urban fabric of all of Shanghai.
在我的身后，这就是今天要给大家介绍的陆家嘴中心 S8C 地块。这个地块其实在浦东规划的初期是一个以居住为主的一个开发区。随着浦东开发的逐渐深入，整个浦东新区的开发，它除了金融贸易和商业贸易以外，还需要更多的商业配套和居住配套和交通的配套。在2006年的时候，我们综合研究了浦东新区开发的功能的需求和周边市民的本身生活的需要。我们综合的研究确定了整个的开发地块是从商住向商办的方向转移。我们规划了近30万的地上的面积，我们充分的发挥了地下2条地铁交通线和公共枢纽站结合的这样一个无可比拟的交通优势。我们规划和建设了整体的陆家嘴中心的项目，达到了商业开发和公共利益的一个再平衡。整个项目的开发呢，主要有3大动因。第一是在整个1990年浦东开发到2009年这个20年间，整个浦东新区的综合的办公楼，它的配套是比较多的，对整个地区起很大作用的商业综合面积是比较缺少的。第二，之前的很多的浦东新区开发的都是以地招商为主的，呈现了一个比较初级的招商引资的一个状态。那么随着浦东开发的深入，逐渐改变这种要加强资源配置型的招商，希望用楼宇来招，吸引更多更好的这个跨国性的国际性的公司。第三个，利用整个项目的南北两侧的轨道交通和公共枢纽交通的优质条件，形成一个综合性的 TOD 的换乘项目。这次3大策略是整个项目的一个设计开发最主要的一个动因。3大动因之下，我们研究制定了3大策略。第一，我们在整个的项目中拿出将近1/3的面积，设计一个综合性的大型的商场。第二，我们在这里还是持续保持着整个的地铁和公交的无缝换乘和人员步行和周围区域的2层平台的延伸的可能性。第三， 我们整个项目一直坚持着整体规划、整体设计、整体建设、整体运营的这样的一个策略。目前为止，经过近12年的开发，我们终于完整的呈现了这样的一个项目。
In addition to the key drivers that Peter discussed, there are a few fundamental ideas that are central to our approach for successful placemaking. First and foremost, focus on the experience of people. Light, scale, materiality, and social activation are crucial. Create environments that are inviting and comfortable for pedestrians. Limit vehicular access. Create places that are civic, that feel public and available to everyone 24/7. Create places that celebrate public transportation as a central part of daily urban life. And deploy all the disciplines to create fully integrated solutions that have a sense of integrity and timelessness. In short, the objective is to create a design for a project that would be an integral part of its community and actively contribute to its broader district. So looking at the site from its northern edge along Century Avenue, which runs along the bottom of the image here, the site occupies nearly the entirety of a large urban block, with only a few existing structures occupying the northwest corner, including a 180-meter tower. The traditional approach would be to cover the entire site with a retail podium with commercial office towers rising above, and a primary retail path transecting the podium with its entries on opposite sides of the parcel. Pudong Financial Plaza's approach is different. With LJZ's marketing team, we created the idea of a stacked retail center, a 5-story entertainment and dining complex above a 6-story lifestyle shopping center. This freed the ground level, making it possible to introduce a new public gathering place, a social heart for the complex and the surrounding area, and connected directly to Century Avenue and to the south. Towers are gathered around the perimeter of this public space, animating it with ground level retail. The central public space is further transformed into a multi-level terrace. Its center is dropped down to the B1 level, while to the south it's raised. The lower portion brings natural daylight to the lower level retail concourse that connects the 2 subway lines and offers commuters a way to orient themselves. Above, at grade, a 6-line bus terminal is tucked in below the raised terrace, concealing the presence of the buses and their maneuvering, while locating it in a position where commuters can conveniently make transfers between bus and rail. The primary tower is located farthest from Century Avenue. And so the 2 lower towers are positioned in such a way to frame a gateway into the project, welcoming visitors with a dramatic view of the main tower. The project extends the orientation and grain of the urban fabric south of Century Avenue. This allowed the towers to be staggered relative to one another so that they remain out of each other's viewshed, protecting views out into the neighborhood. The tallest tower, although set back from Century Avenue to eliminate shadowing on residential neighbors to the north, remains highly visible. As one comes closer to the site, you can begin to see the terraced open space at the heart of the project. And from above, one can clearly see the centrality of this public space and how it is shaped both as a pedestrian connector into the surrounding neighborhoods, as well as a place for social gathering and events. The concourse level at B1 is directly connected into the subway concourses. The Line 2 station is the white area at the top of the image, and the Line 9 station is the white area at the bottom of the image. Multiple entries lead users directly into and through a rich retail environment, guiding them towards the open plaza that is the heart of the project. Although commuters and visitors are one level below grade, they are connected directly to outdoor space and natural daylight without having to change levels. To the left is the lower level of the shopping center. Meanwhile, all of the infrastructure and development contained in gray areas are limited to the perimeter of the site, leaving the center of the project available for pedestrians and users. The three terrace open space. The plaza is at the commuter concourse level here at the bottom of the image. Above that is the ground level, and above that, the upper terrace, which conceals the bus terminal and which is connected to all of the buildings via bridges. Linking all three levels is a cascade of landscaping and amphitheater seating designed to support public as well as informal gatherings. From the south, a double-sided open-air retail passage invites people into the heart of the project, with retail on the right concealing the bus terminal, which with a slightly different vantage point reveals the entry for the buses. The green wall above wraps the southern edge of the site, transforming and evolving into a landscape berm that cradles the project's southern edge. This creates a green environment for pedestrians along the busy street. And it also helped us address one of the most challenging aspects of creating a humane and welcoming environment for pedestrians, which was, how could we best address the numerous pieces of infrastructure necessary for supporting the subway system below? Shafts, air handlers, enormous chillers, and access panels of diverse eras were scattered around the site, typically occupying the most visible and most valuable corners. Integrating these pieces into the design in order to minimize their presence in the public realm required extensive collaboration with the Subway Bureau. The Bureau, understandably, had many concerns, not the least of which was ensuring that whatever was proposed would allow the subway to continue to be fully operational throughout construction. So as the team sought to find appropriate solutions for every single one of these pieces of equipment, they developed a range of solutions, interpreting the equipment in different ways, from either sculptural art pieces that animated the landscape and announced entries into the project, to fully integrating them into the building's massing and elevations so that they simply disappeared, leaving the corners available for major access into the project. The exterior expression of the buildings was intended to develop a kind of performative envelope, one that would offer a cohesiveness between the opacity of the retail and the desired transparency for the office buildings, while minimizing energy consumption in both buildings. For both building types, we developed a kind of delicate light veil that abstracted the scale of the buildings, backlit to create a soft glow of color in the evenings for retail, which is clad in a pleated punched metal panel system, a system that creates a sense of movement as the punched openings and the shadows that they create on the wall behind interact to create an ever-changing moire pattern generated by the movement of viewers as they walk around the site. The office towers offer floor-to-ceiling glass with sunshades to provide greater user comfort by managing glare, as well as differential solar heat gain around the perimeter, and controlling reflections back out into the public realm. On the office buildings, the sunshades and light shelves are composed of a semi-open bar stock system that disperses light back into the building and creates its own sense of movement as people move about the site. Together, both of these systems create related but differentiated expression for the office and retail buildings. The buildings are ever changing as one moves about them, sometimes appearing solid and sometimes revealing a diaphanous and glassy interior within.
在设计和建造的初期，我们就和法国的老佛爷集团一起进行前期的策划，最终我们成功引进了老佛爷的商场，成为我们整个商场的一个主力店。目前为止，整个商场已经开业了1年多。这个1年来，我们在整个地区，我们形成了一个非常好的一个商业的聚集的中心，为周边的市民、居民、办公的人群提供了一个高等级的现代化的综合性的一个娱乐的和休闲购物的场所。经过12年的长期的努力，我们在整个的设计团队，尤其是在 SM 设计事务所的密切的合作下，我们完美呈现了陆家嘴中心的项目。我们招商合作了泰康保险的总部和支付宝金融的集团的总部，我们自己也完整的运营了一个商业中心。这个项目我们认为它是在整个的开发的功能上取得了商业和办公的平衡，整个的商业开发与公共利益、公交换乘之间的平衡，最终呈现了一个社会和经济利益双重丰收的这样一个完美的项目。
Well, I think Peter summarizes the project's benefits and contributions to the users, the visitors, and the residents of the district well. So we'll end our presentation today and again express our appreciation to all of you for joining us. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Peter and Leah. We have now heard from all our Award of Excellence winners in the District Master Plan Scale category. After my fellow jury members and I deliberate, we will announce the new Urban Habitat District Master Plan Scale overall category winner on day 3 of the conference. And don't forget, you also have a vote. This year, each category will also recognize an audience award and trophy, which will be announced on day 3. Go to the Audience Voting tab on the left side menu of your screen and mark your ballot for the District Master Plan Scale category now. And then join us back after a short break. Thank you.